Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear students of class 8th, let me first of all tell you people that what I have discussed with you people last time in my last lecture, in my last talk, that was about the role of judiciary in India. Dear students, I was talking to you people about the structure of the courts in India, and that very concept I was trying to talk about to you people with you people, that how many levels of the courts in India do we have. I told you people that every time that we do have the apex court that's located at Delhi, namely Supreme Court, that we are having the chain of the courts downwards, like we do have the local and subordinate courts usually at a district level, at the tehsil level. Then in between we do have this state high courts to the every states of the country. Even sometimes the two or one or more than two states are sharing the same high court. So nutshell of the story was that we do have the integrated system of judiciary in India. Means if the decisions are taken by the highest courts, they are not refuted and refused by the lower courts. And sometimes when the people of country feel that the justice is not delivered properly to them, that we witnessed a case of that very lady who got ablated herself there that very states when the local court refused to give her a proper justice, and those criminals, they were the accused people, they were left free, they were acquitted, but they went to the higher court, and then ultimately to the Supreme Court, where the justice was done to them, to that very lady, and they were imprisoned. Lifetime imprisonment was given to those very people. So it's integrated type of judiciary. It's the free judiciary. It's the free from nepotism. It's free from any sort of favoritism. So we have thus beauty concept that Indian system, in a democratic system, the third wing of the government, whether we can say that it's the legislature, executive, the government, this judiciary, where the laws are implemented, which are every time putting the eagle's eye on every law passed by the parliament, whether the law is not violating the fundamental principles of the basic individual life. That's when we simply call, we can have the judicial activism. Under the judicial activism, we can cross-examination, we can hold the cross-examination of that very law, and we can declare that very law null and void. So dear students, now let's move ahead to the topic for today that I have studied. I have chosen for you people. Yes students, the topic which I have chosen for today, that's the understanding the marginalization from chapter number 7. Chapter number 7 titled as this, understanding marginalization. So marginalization. So let's try to understand the concept of marginalization. Before this, that I am going to jump to discuss certain issues and different dynamics, different sides of the same topic. Let me first of all make you understand what does the word marginalized mean. So simply, if you talk about literally, the marginalized term means a person or a group considered as the insignificant or peripheral. Means they are the group minority in nature. They are considered insignificant. They are considered least advantageous. They are given a less priority. They are not prioritized. They are not preferenced. Means they are not the core of the country, but they are the periphery of the country. Means they live among the borders. They live among the poles. That's how we call them. They are the marginalized. They remain away from the basic benefits of the core, what the center is doing, and they remain away from these all the beneficiary schemes, policies, decisions decided by the cabinet and by the government. So they live among the peripheries. They get the least benefit of those things which the government is trying to do for the sake of his country people. But the question is, why so? If they are the people of the same nation, same country and same soil, why they remain every time underestimated? Why the government is paying a deaf ear? Why they are heedless? Why their voice is not heard by any common by the government? Why they every time remain below poverty line? Why government is not thinking about their emancipation upliftment? If government is thinking, so what are those parameters? In which context the government is trying to boost their character and boost their nature, that they should come out of this wheel of ignorance and wheel of this tag of this marginalized communities. So these marginalized people are the part of my country. They are the part of every country rather. But as a student of political science, we should give them the equal respect. They should be treated economically one, politically one, socially one, culturally one. We should owe a lot of respect. We should own their culture, their tastes, their values, their taboos, their dogmas that which they are following. Their students, these marginalized people are the part of our community. Let's not underestimate them. So the process of this marginalization, it is social in nature. Let me tell you here, it's social in nature. Then it's political in nature, and later on it becomes economical in taste. Marginalization is the process of social exclusion, of making a group of people less important or relegated to a secondary position. When the people are given the less importance and less priority, what I said to you people, that they are underestimated, less important, less significant, less prominence is given to them, or relegated to the secondary position. They are not the priority, they are at the second list. So it's a process in which something is, or someone is pushed to the edge by a group or assigned lesser importance. When you are pushed to the back seat, that you are incapable, you can't do this thing. So the international organization, namely UNESCO, describing the marginalization is a form of acute and persistent disadvantage rooted in the underlying the social inequalities. Beautiful. I must call it a beautiful. It is a form of acute and persistent disadvantage. Persistent, consistent disadvantage rooted in the underlying social inequalities. Means, what I said to you, it's social in nature first of all. They are deep rooted. It's skin deep in underlying the social inequalities. Among the social inequalities where the barriers are created, where the impediments are cemented, that you can't do this thing, you are socially incapable. So you are socially least advantageous. You are tagged that you can't do this thing. You are incapable and you are incompetent. You can't do this thing. Dear students, how the way we are going to try to describe this thing, that's like this, that how this marginalized section or marginalized group needs to be empowered. The different dynamics and the different ideas and the subtopics needs to be discussed within the same topic on today and within the coming days. So dear students, if you talk about these marginalized sections within the context of India, we are having here the one term, we call them Adivasis. Adivasis. The term Adivasi literally means the original inhabitants. It literally means the original inhabitants. It means, if we talk about the Adivasi people, if we talk about the Indian marginalized section, they are the Adivasis, and Adivasi literally means the original inhabitants. Means they are the people, indigenous people, means local people. Indigenous, the moment when we say indigenous, means the person belong to India, belong to their particular motherland. Here the land means India. So indigenous, they are not exogenous. When they are indigenous, it means that they are not exogenous. They are not foreign elements. They are not the foreign legs, but they are the inhabitants of India. They are the locals of India. They reside in India from the long span of time and from long span of moment. If we talk about their, first of all, the statistics, their population point of view, as per the 2011 census, it's 8%. 8% is the total population of these marginalized sections. 8%, dear students, it's 8% only. The total, they make 8% of the total population of India, right? So if you talk about their groups, there are under 500 groups in India. We simply call the Adivasis. 500 groups are residing in Indian soil, and predominantly they have occupied the one that's also called the home of the Adivasis, what we simply called Odisha. Odisha, a state. That's also called the home of the Adivasis. Almost more than 60 different tribal groups reside there within the state, what you simply call Odisha. So then the moment when you talk about their practice and the rituals, definitely what I said to you earlier, that they are marginalized, they are alienated people, they're the people, they live among the slums, living among the jungles, living among the jungle dwellers. So there are different people who talk about their rights. That later on I am going to discuss that very thing as well when we talk about that with an analytical point of view and analytical and what the government is doing for them. First of all, let me describe them, who they are. So if we talk about the rituals, what sort of practices they are practicing so far as the religion is concerned. So they are not the followers of the Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism, but they do have their separate own the religion lines which they are following, very much traditional to them. And if we talk about the spoken language, they spoke very old language that's as old as Sanskrit. So if we talk about their Adivasi, their stereotype mentality, stereotypic, that they are the people who are exotic, and they are the primitive people who live among the jungles. So they have their own social setup, social milieu, and in which they are residing. They have their own social strategies in which they are residing. But the concern here is, if we are having the huge 8% means a lot. In India, as per the high population point of view, India is ranging its population day by day, raising its population day by day. So if you talk about the population point of view, then 8% does not speak least. It speaks volumes then when you talk about the 8% of the population. So do you feel that this 8% of the population needs to be politically and economically sound? There needs to be economically and sound, economically, politically, and socially, and culturally. They need a sound feedback from the government of the country. Dear students, definitely yes, there is no ambiguity sort of situation to feel like this, that we can say that they need not to be represented, their culture, their social values, their norms, their language, their religion, their dress pattern, their food habits. They need to be specially guided by the constitution of country, although that constitution speaks like this. So, but the practice is entirely different. That's why we are the different social activists and the political activists, political pundits, writers who talk about these people, how these marginalized sections are exploited technically by the people. One of the most prominent, my heartthrob, which I must call, that's Arundhati Roy. She talks about their rights. She, among the different articles, among the different speeches, among the different writings, among the books, she talks that how this section is marginalized by the business tycoons and the business magnates of the nation. Students, yes, it's on the screen. The lady, the Booker Prize winner Arundhati Roy. I'm happy this time to talk on this very lady here, the Booker Prize winner. There's one great nice textbook on his credit. That's the God of Small Things. You may get a chance to God of Small Things to read that very book among your higher levels. God of Small Things, the book that got the Booker Prize. Okay, let's go ahead. So here the Arundhati Roy also talks about these. The lady is known to us for the people who are marginalized in India. She often talks about this very section of the society that's underestimated and that is overruled and overwhelmed by the super tycoons, business magnates, and the business champions of the country. Dear students, if we talk about the social life of these marginalized groups, marginalized people, sections who are living within the societies, they are what I said to you earlier. They are these jungle dwellers. They live among the jungles. Their primary habitat is that is jungle. They live among the forests. But do you know, we do know as well that the different resources of the forest, like you talk about the minerals, you talk about the wood, you talk about the timber. We talk about the different coal, petroleum, everything that's extracted from the forest lands, that's taken from the forests, shrubs, medicines, etc., etc. So they are the people who wholly and solely rely on all those natural resources. They exploit these natural resources technically, and later on they were using them. But ironically, the most problematic thing and the hot jolting situation is that when the core is going to overwhelm all these peripheries, when they are going to show their prominence among these jungles, and they are going to loot and plunder these jungles, and they are going to establish their different universities on the name of the humanitarian concept. They are going to build such beautiful roads, beautiful shopping malls. They are exploiting and extracting all those resources and utilizing them for the maintenance of the core. And this periphery remains every time exploited. It remains every time on the loggerheads. It remains for the mercy of God, on the mercy of God. So this lady, the author, the Arundhati ma'am, every time talks about all these things, that how these marginalized sections or the minority community, whether it is a Muslim minority somewhere or whether it is a Adivasi minorities, the people who are the jungle dwellers who live among the slums, who do have the very dilapidated conditions, abominably living, so having not enjoying the best literacy rate, not getting the advantage of the what the constitution describes for those very people. So they are living on the mercy of God. Still there are certain peoples, black sheep, who are every time going to squeeze their resources and to put them before the on their toes. So we need to discuss the different dynamics of this chapter, not from the book as well. So inshallah, within a couple of days, I'm going to talk on it. I'm going to quote certain statements from the lady as well, by which we can rectify and justify this thing, that really justice is not done to the every court of India, what India simply calls that largest democracy under the sun. So ladies and gentlemen, let's stop it here. Let me meet you once again within a new lecture. Till then, take care. Allah Hafiz.